Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple. It's a Shiva temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. Before we get started, we got the gold linga, and it's beautiful. The man that made it has a gold shop. He's Indian, of course, and he has a gold shop in Atlanta. And he did a beautiful job, and he really got into it. I mean, I understand not only did he not make any money constructing it, but he actually donated some money to it. He wanted to be a part of it, And well, if you go to michaelmamas.net, when we announce this podcast, you'll see a picture of it there. And it came out really, really nice. When there's a thing called a muhurta, that's kind of like the birth time for an event. And so Panditji is calculating a muhurta based on Jyotish, for when we actually start to implement its use. But we have it. That's great. All this is very powerful. And I'll let you all know on upcoming podcasts when he has a muhurta and when all that starts. Scotty, you had some questions, I think, about the linga or some comments or something?
No, I was just wondering when you said about the reveal, but
the reveal, the muhurta,
shape or the actual physical characteristics of it. What is it? Maybe you could talk about what it's like and what it means or that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. And then you were asking because, there are different ways of doing the linga. Oftentimes it's just the linga, which is like the Shiva energy, and the yoni, which is Mother Divine. And so together it's Shiva Shakti, very powerful. And the yoni is like the stand for the linga. And so it's a shape. And I've talked about mapping in the past, how the foot in reflexology maps onto the rest of the body. Well, the Shiva Linga Yoni, the linga maps onto the Hiranyagarbha, the structure of the universe, the shape of the universe, the essence of it, which is Shiva, the embodiment of the pure transcendent. And so and these things are technologies, I heard something on the news just this morning, and it was Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son, I think it is, and they were talking about everything going on in Afghanistan, which hopefully we'll get to a little bit, but just the whole world situation. He was saying, well, we have to turn to God. God is the only way that all this mess is going to get straightened out. And I have to admit that years past, when I hear somebody talk like that, it's like, I found it kind of exasperating, and it was like, oh, brother, what is that about? And so many people do. That's why so many people are, rejecting religion. It just doesn't make any sense. We're going to turn to God, and He's going to fix it. But again, I talked, I think, in my previous podcast about how I like listening to, Christian radio stations and things when I'm driving. And it's because they say things like that, and it's so easy to see a deeper meaning that has significance and is valid. And, a lot of people are satisfied. Okay, turn to God, great, But to me, I needed a conceptual understanding of how that would actually work in a very real world, down to earth, scientific sense. And really, I think that's what I bring. And that's not me, but that's what Vedic knowledge brings to humanity. So it's technology, but now some people are, because devotion to Shiva or whatever, just an emotional thing, it's a feeling thing. Well, Vedic knowledge encompasses both, and one stabilizes the other. We have a right and a left side of the brain. We have logic and we have emotion, feeling. And it's when the two integrate that it becomes more powerful. And so with this Shiva Linga, what we have is and we'll say it just from a scientific perspective here. It's a mapping mechanism whereby we can perform operations, if you will, all specified in the Shastras, that part of the Veda, that tells us how to implement those things to enliven their value. And that's Vedic technology. And so by doing that, because the Shiva value, the transcendental value, God, is the underlying, unifying, nourishing, life-supporting quality of the essence of all existence that birthed this whole universe in the first place. And what happens is we get distracted. We become identified with superficial values and lose our connection to varying degrees to that Shiva value, that source of infinite harmony and coherence that is so life-supporting. And so through these technologies, with the Shiva Linga and it's called Rudra Shake, and I've talked about that in the past, it's a technology whereby we enliven that value of the transcendent, the value of Shiva, the value of infinite correlation and harmony, and radiate it to the environment. That's what Mount Soma is all about. That's what we're building here. What we're building here is an enlightened city. It was brought to us by Brahmamaya, Mamuni Mayan. What that means is it's individuals, they're actually rishis, seers, that cognized these technologies thousands of years ago and give them to us. And those are the technologies that we perform today. It's all in the Sanskrit literature, you see? And so that's in a nutshell, if that's a nutshell, really what the Shiva Linga is all about. And, this is just a very cursory understanding. I've talked about how a Rudra is Shiva as his value manifests in the relative. So some people say Rudra is another name for Shiva. Well, that's true, but really Shiva is more the transcendental value, where Rudra is the value as it radiates out into the universe. Rudra is often seen as formidable, as frightening, and that's because any sort of negativity is dissolved by Rudra. Harmony is brought, coherence. So if you're identified with negativity, if you're identified with incoherence, or if you're identified with what oftentimes I guess people would refer to as evil, it gets dispelled. So if you're in that camp, you find him fearful. But if you're living in harmony with nature, the Rudra is supportive. You see, he's there to annihilate, if you will, negativity. Shiva the destroyer, okay? Anyway, I could go on and on and on, and I do in my classes. This is very sort of a brief explanation of these are highly sophisticated principles. And that stuff has been around for thousands of years. But if you think about it, in the medieval times, we all thought the world was flat. Well, the ancient Greeks knew the world was round. They calculated its diameter. They knew that the planets went around the sun and all that stuff they knew. And that was, a couple thousand years ago or what have you. Well, ancient Vedic literature has been around for thousands of years more than that. The knowledge is, in fact, is eternal, but the cognitions we have are estimated to be, so many thousand years ago, somebody cognized it. These rishis were around on that. But far beyond the ancient Greeks. But it brings out an important principle. We forget. We have the knowledge, it gets lost. We regain it again to certain degrees, it gets lost. And right now, let's face it, right now in the world is in chaos. We've got a mess here. Why? Because people have forgotten. They've forgotten their connection to the source of infinite harmony and coherence. And they become identified, and I've talked about this before, like Maharishi Patanjali said thousands of years ago, a thing called samskaras. You get these impressions in your awareness. And these impressions program how you think. They determine how you think. And there are whole groups that have different samskaras that they all share. The Taliban has their samskaras. Everybody has their samskaras. And they're false impressions, if you will. And so as we evolve, the samskaras shift. Maharishi Patanjali said something along the lines that Originally they're like etched in stone, but as you evolve, the chit, the storehouse of those impressions, softens and becomes more like clay, so it easily is, smoothed over, and then becomes more like gelatin, and then water, and then air, and there are no impressions. In other words, then you're not functioning from a place of identity with limited perspective, but you're coming from that place of Shiva, infinite harmony with the infinite source of coherence and life-supporting behavior, you see? So that's what we've got. It's been known for thousands of years. This Mamuni Mayan, Brahma Maya, they gave us a technology where we can build an enlightened city that radiates that Shiva value to an entire environment. And it says right in the Vedic literature, and this is not metaphysics. This is not hocus pocus. This is science accessed in a different way. Cognition, it's called. And I've lectured about that before, what cognition is. And so one enlightened city per continent is enough to transform the world. We are at the time, as I've said, of this major transformation into an enlightened age. So it's no coincidence that Mount Soma, this knowledge has been recovered, and we have the design. And doggone it, I've been talking about this for how many years? 20 years in a formalized sense. Ever since early 1980s, 81, 82, have I known about it. But it wasn't until 94 when I actually started a school and started to say, we got to build this thing. Why? I mean, first of all, it's a good thing anytime. But why? Because we could see even back then that things were getting crazier and crazier. And one thing really, it's been hard for me because I give these lectures and people basically stand up and cheer. And, this is the great, I've been looking for this my whole life, they say. And they walk out that door for the lecture hall, and a lot of them, you never see them again. And even the ones that you do, it's so hard, you see, because these storehouse of impressions, just because they hear truth, when they hear truth like that, it resonates. And they feel it. Oh man, this is it. Yeah, I've always known this, they say. And yes, they have deep inside, but they don't function from that level because they're identified more with a more superficial, limited type of knowing. And so that's why they walk out that lecture hall door and they go back to those samskaras, those impressions that can be like etched in stone or what have you. And it's just so exasperating. All this stuff that's going on with, the list is so long. Afghanistan now is the latest one, and based on your storehouse of impressions, you might say, well, what we did is exactly right. We needed to just pull the military out. The other extreme might be, well, we should have first gotten the citizens and the Afghanis that helped, got them out, got all our military equipment out of there, and then pulled out the military. That's up to you. All I'm asking you to do, and I've been asking you to do this through all my different podcasts for quite a while now, get the news, not one perspective. I heard somebody, because I watch the different channels, I heard somebody in the news that said, oh, it was done exactly right. Now, I don't want to even give my opinion, though I guess at this point it's obvious, but if you want to agree with that, that's your business. But then, you go to another channel and they say something very different. You have to make up your own mind. All I'm asking you to do is see what's out there. Don't just limit yourself to one paradigm identity based on the limited group or the one channel or the one source of news or your little circle of friends or what have you. Expand your awareness, expand your horizons, know what's out there, and then think, reflect, ponder, and make up your own mind. Maybe you think that's right. And the list is so long now. Abortion, it's up to you. Do you think it's right that somebody should be able to abort a fetus 1 hour before it's to be born? On the other hand, do you think there's a window of opportunity there where if a 14-year-old teenager gets I mean, I hate to even say it, but raped by some gorilla. Forgive me, but I'm trying to somehow be descriptive here. That it's not okay for her to take a morning after pill, and she's got to have the baby or whatever. Those are a couple of extremes. Decide for yourself, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? And the list is so long. The border, another one. Our border is purely arbitrary, and so why do we have the right to draw a line in the sand somewhere and tell people they're not allowed to cross it? On the other hand, does that mean that there should be a law against having a lock on your front door because it's an arbitrary line? Please think about these things. Make your own decisions. CRT, is it right to teach these children that? Now I understand via this CRT portal, there are some classes now, some schools are separating the black kids into one classroom, the white kids in another classroom. I mean, that goes right back to the principle in Vedic literature about the mandala. You go around full circle and you get to a polar opposite. No difference, no difference, no difference, no difference, and it's completely different. Around and around we go. And it's been said, if you become radical enough to the right, you become left. If you become radical enough to the left, you become right. I mean, are we learning yet? Media bias, electric cars. People are against petroleum and polluting the environment. So let's go electric because those cars don't pollute. Well, what about change the channel and they're saying that it costs more in pollution to manufacture an electric car than an electric car produces in pollution of burning petrol throughout the lifetime of the vehicle. Who do you believe? I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm not asking you to listen to me and believe what I think. But the knowledge, the information is out there. And if you're going to have an opinion, at least have it be an educated one and not one that's channeling you down a narrow little path of identity, okay, of samskara. I've noticed that there are a good number of people, they like to get these past life readings. I mean, I've done it. They're interesting, who was I in a past life? But I've seen that a lot of people, what they really want is to hear that they were somebody great in a past life. And it's almost as if they can then rest on their laurels. Oh, I was, I don't know, name somebody, and because I was this great person in a past life, I can rest on my laurels this lifetime and know that I'm great. With everything that's going on in the world today, I mean, there could have been a time when you were like, well, yeah, I'd love to be great, but what do I need to do to be great? I mean, what would I do? Now you know what you can do. Stand up. These are the times that try men's souls. Now is the time to stand up. Davy Crockett said, first be sure you're right and then go ahead. I'm just asking you that before you go ahead, you make sure you're right. And the only way you're going to do that is to hear all the different sides, reflect, ponder, weigh things, and be sure you're not coming from some scars. Do your best to make sure you're not coming from just the pressure. Isn't it of your peers or what have you? Isn't it interesting that if you live in San Francisco, you think one way. And if you live in, I don't know, where somewhere else, you think another way. If you live in Afghanistan, you think another way. And don't you need a better reason to believe what you believe than that? Can't you free yourself from the pressures and the conditioning of limited thought in the environment that you find yourself in? That's all I'm asking you to do. That's all I'm asking you to do. Wearing masks. One group says if you wear a mask, it doesn't do any good. Another one group says if you're not wearing a mask, you're killing people across the way from you. The evidence is out there. The virus, the vaccines, where the virus came from. It's all out there. but you're not going to get it if you keep a narrow little window with your blinders on and decide that you've got the answer because you heard it on your favorite news station. The list is so long of all the border. I mean, you know the list. Anyway. So really, the trick in world government, the trick in politics, the trick in how the world is run and what happens, what wars are waged, what policies are adhered to. You know what it boils down to? Marketing. If you can effectively find a way to market your narrative, what you want people to believe, and you can take control, and this is key, take control of the momentum of the mass mentality, you can accomplish anything. I talked in the past about the Russian Revolution and how they overthrew the Tsar. At the time, hordes of people, they overthrew the Tsar. But it was, I don't know how long later, decades for sure, that they finally realized that, you know who did that? It was the bankers in New York, in Germany, in I forget where else, that wanted to take over the economy of Russia because they make a lot of money. And so they floated this narrative. They marketed it. They captured the mass mentality and overthrew the Tsar. And to this day, those banks control the economy of Russia. Please, we have to start thinking. We have to start looking beyond our limited mentalities. Scotty?
Yeah, one of the things I heard about that was they asked, I think it was one of the Lenin or whoever it was, how do you do it? And he says it's easy. You just put fear in them. You know, that's how you.
Yeah, fear is a powerful tool. If you can instill fear in people, you can control them. And here's a. I wrote this down. I take my notes through the week, and this one I thought, if it wasn't for fear, it would be obvious that this insanity that's going on will not endure. It's just too crazy. It's almost like they've overplayed their hand. I mean, this stuff is nuts. If you've got a 12-year-old daughter or, you know, in a spa for women where they take their showers, a man, fully intact male, can say, well, I identify with being female, and then go take a shower with the women. And that's supposed to be okay. I mean, okay, right there, I took a stand. I'm trying not to, but should have phrased it a little differently. But ask yourself if you're okay with that. Ask yourself if you had a little daughter, if you would be okay with that. And then men, fully intact men, that are in prison, just claim that they're identified with being a woman, and so they put them in women's prisons with women, where women are getting raped, and they're passing out condoms now to the prisoners. Decide for yourself. But I'm not seeing it, you know. Yeah. We have the technology to fix the whole mess. It's not going to be because we control the mass mentality. I don't see that happening from the surface to the depth. That's like you got a sick plant and you're trying to paint the leaves green to make it healthy. Everybody think the way I think and everything will be fine. You got to water the root of life. That's a Vedic principle. It goes back thousands of years. And if the technology is there to water the root of life, that's all I really care about, because I think that's the only real healing for this thing. And doesn't it go back in a really interesting way to what Franklin Graham, Reverend Graham, had to say, which I find very interesting. The only way we're going to fix this whole mess is if we turn to God. But it's not going to be, some sort of emotional thing. There's a technology to it as well. And that's offered in Vedic literature. It's about building these enlightened cities. We're in the progress. I think there's been something like $30 million invested into this so far. I think I've been told recently that I'm overestimating 200 million. It's not going to cost that much. Plus, we could take the next huge leap forward, quantum leap forward, multiple times, multiple-fold more powerful, probably for what, 20 million or something, and then slowly roll it out from there. There are people out there that could afford to do that, and they wouldn't even feel it. And the only reason they're not doing it is they have identity with a paradigm that does not include this technology into their worldview. It's frustrating, It's frustrating. And it's also frustrating because so many times people jump up and cheer after my lectures. They say, yeah, I get it. Sanskrit literature, Vedic technology, it all makes very logical sense. And I offer all that, this is just a podcast, but I offer all that in detail in my lectures, and people get it. But they just recoil back. It's like your identities are like a rubber band. They can get stretched, but they just spring right back. So come on. Time to be great. These are the times that try men's souls. All right. Unless, Adrian, you haven't said anything? Scott, you guys have anything to add before we close?
Did you want to say anything in particular about natural law versus global mentality? Anything else?
Natural law.
Specifically?
Well, that's what they call it when they talk about the Shiva, source of infinite coherence. What is that? Is it wells up through existence? Is it wells up through life? Is it wells up through nature? It's natural law. It's laws that are natural to the earth, natural to how plants grow, natural to how the earth spins, and natural to how the human physiology functions. Not just the physiology of the body, but the psychophysiology of the mind. And so all we're talking about here is returning to nature, returning to natural law. And that does not mean living in a cabin and going barefoot. I mean, you may choose to do that, but you can be living in harmony with natural law and be in a 20-story high-rise with your suit and tie and patent leather shoes or what have you. So natural law, there's a wide range of flexibility with its nature. Anything from going barefoot to wearing whatever it is you wear. But nevertheless, there's a connection to that underlying basis, to Mother Nature, to Mother Earth. Just like wheat in a field, they can blow this way, blow that way. They're not all blown the same exact way all the time. But nevertheless, they're rooted in Mother Earth. And that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about an indoctrination into a mentality. And that's what they call nation building. If everybody thought the way we thought, the nations would be better. We know better than that now. We've seen it. Look what we did in, Cambodia, Pol Pot. We created that. Vietnam. We made a mess of the country. And there's a lot of studies where they go into different villages and try to give them refrigerators and stuff, and just to help them out. And we realized that they had a ecological balance in how they lived. And all we did is disturb it. And now the same thing in Afghanistan. Look what a mess. Iraq. We have to understand, and I'm not saying, if somebody's out there just killing people and doing the horrific things they're doing, yeah, we got to do something to stop that. But we have to know where to draw the line, because there's cultures, and different cultures are different. And they are cultured to live in harmony with natural law that exists on those parts of the world, which are different than the laws of nature on our parts of the world. Laws of nature are different on a mountaintop than they are in a desert. And by going in there and trying to impose our worldview, our laws of nature, even if they're correct for us, even if they weren't correct for us. Trying to go in there and do it in another nation does not work, and it will never work. It's like sticking your finger into a pond of water. And when you pull out your finger, you think it's going to still have the same influence. It will not. The moment you pull that water out, the water rushes back in, and it's like the finger was never there. These cultures, they are inherent in the nature of the land, the nature of the soil, the nature of the environment, the nature of existence, natural law for those cultures. And we just keep forgetting that, keep making a mess of things. That's a good one, Adrian. I'm glad you brought it up. Anything else?
Yeah, I think it's important that we also realize that those natural laws in those areas can go awry, like you said, and they
Good
can
point.
get out of whack.
Yes.
So it's not like they're totally living in natural law, but those forces are pushing them in those directions or whatever.
Yeah. Nation building destroys nations, is what I was really trying to say. But the way we do our nation building, you know. But everything is predisposed from time to time to getting sick. And there are a lot of different governments and nations. They're really sick right now. But we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Like I said, there's a great friend of mine, Chinese doctor, internationally famous, Dr. John Shen. Some of you may have heard of him. He and I became very close friends. And he said, I don't deal with disease. I deal with health. You feed the health of the nation. You feed the health of the individual. Trying to stamp out the disease is like trying to stamp out darkness in an unlit room. The only way to heal it is to bring light. And that's what we do with these enlightened cities. We radiate the light of life. And by virtue of that, the ill health in all these different nations throughout the world naturally blossoms in a way that's unique to that culture. Another good point, Scotty. Anything else, you guys? All right.
I think just
go ahead.
on, like on the personal level, you were talking about, right now you're talking about the national version of like the samskaras, or mass mentalities, that, and each culture has their own, each nation has their own, and then communities have their own, families have their own, and individuals have their own.
Yes,
they're
ma'am.
stacked
Yes,
one on
ma'am.
top of each other,
Well
and
said.
they're multiple. But I think what we do is collude with the one that feels the most comfortable to us. So we watch the news stations that we're most comfortable with. We read the newspapers that are in alignment with what we already believe. We talk to friends and family who agree with what we already believe to kind of bolster our own samskaras, our own belief systems, instead
Exactly
of
right.
finding out what might be deeper, And so I think what you keep saying over and over and over again is don't, there's a resonance. When somebody believes what you believe, there's a resonance, and it's a sense of unity, and it can be hard to fight that and look outside of that for yourself. So it would have to be a choice. There's a natural pull to talk to people who agree.
And we're not talking about anarchy here. We're not talking about going against our own cultures, our own families, any of that.
No.
We're talking about breathing health into it, separating out any bathwater from the baby. And cultures are called cultures because they culture, especially a healthy culture, cultures the awareness of the people. They talk about the importance of the family dynamic, the family unit, how it cultures the awareness of the people in the family. They evolve. It doesn't mean that we all become homogenous in our thinking. People down the street, different cultural background, different ethnicity, what have you, they're going to have their own culture. So it's harmony in the midst of diversity. Every individual in the family even has a certain level of autonomy, of course. But nevertheless, there's a cultural environment And it's something that feeds and nourishes every individual in the family. To annihilate that, to get rid of that, is horrific. Good point again, Adrian. Anything else, you guys? All right. I guess that does it for now. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time on Ancient Secrets Revealed.